The first time Simon called her crazy, Clara almost believed him. It was a Tuesday evening, late autumn, the kind of gray, drizzly night that made the house feel smaller and the silence feel heavier. She had spent the afternoon baking his favorite, a lemon drizzle cake with the glaze still warm and sticky, because she had noticed him pulling away, noticed the distance in his eyes, and she thought, foolishly, that if she could just be good enough, sweet enough, he would come back to her. She was still learning then that his distance was not a problem she could solve. It was a strategy. He came home at 9:30, 2 hours later than he'd said. His collar smelled of jasmine and something else, something musky and unfamiliar. Clara, standing in the kitchen with the cake between them like a peace offering, asked where he'd been. Her voice was soft, careful. She had learned over the past year to be careful. Simon sighed. It was a long, weary sound, the sigh of a man being asked to carry an unreasonable burden. He set down his briefcase and looked at her with an expression that might have been pity. "Clara, we talked about this. I had the Henderson dinner. I told you about it 3 times. Don't you remember?" She didn't remember. She was sure he hadn't told her. But his voice was so certain, so calm, so utterly without guilt that she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. I don't think you mentioned it. I would have written it down. You know I always write things down." He walked to her and took her hands. His touch was warm, familiar. The hands she had held at their wedding, the hands she had believed would keep her safe. "Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. You've been forgetting things more and more lately. Last week, you couldn't find your keys. The week before, you lost your phone. And now this. I think maybe you should talk to someone, a professional. There's no shame in it." Her keys. She had searched for them for an hour, tearing apart the house, while Simon watched from the sofa with a furrowed brow and gentle concern. He had found them eventually, in the refrigerator, of all places, tucked behind the milk. She had no memory of putting them there. She had cried with relief and confusion, and Simon had held her and told her it was okay, that he would take care of her, that she just needed to rest. Her phone. It had vanished from her nightstand and reappeared 3 days later in the pocket of a coat she hadn't worn in months. She had been certain she hadn't put it there, but Simon had looked at her with such tender worry, had asked her so gently if she was feeling all right, that she had stopped trusting her own certainty. Now, standing in the kitchen with the lemon cake between them, she felt the same terrible doubt creeping in. Had he told her about the dinner? She couldn't remember. She couldn't be sure. And if she couldn't be sure about this, what else was she wrong about? "I'm fine," she whispered. I thought, I know." He pulled her into a hug, his chin resting on top of her head. "I know, sweetheart. It's okay. We'll figure this out together." She pressed her face into his chest and breathed in the scent of jasmine. And something else. Something she couldn't name. She didn't ask again. The campaign against Clara unfolded slowly, carefully, over the course of a year. Simon was a master of narrative. He had built his career in public relations, crafting stories for corporations and politicians, shaping perception with the casual ease of a man who understood that truth was not something you discovered, but something you constructed. He brought that same skill home, weaving a story about his wife that was so subtle, so insidious, that even Clara began to believe it. At dinner parties, he would squeeze her hand and say with a rueful smile, "Clara's been having a rough time lately. The anxiety, you know, but she's working on it. She's so brave." The other wives would look at her with sympathy, their eyes soft and pitying. The husbands would nod, their expressions carefully neutral, filing away the information that Simon's wife was fragile. When she missed a friend's birthday brunch, an event Simon had deliberately not told her about, then reminded her of the morning of, when it was too late to get ready, he shook his head sadly and told the hostess, "She's been forgetting things. I'm a little worried, honestly. Between us, I think she might need to see someone." The story spread, whispered from friend to friend. until Clara noticed the way people looked at her, gently, warily, as if she might break at any moment. When she confronted him about the late nights, the strange perfumes, the lipstick stain she found on his collar, a stain he insisted wasn't there, holding the shirt up to the light and frowning with genuine seeming confusion, he would sigh and say, "Sweetheart, I think you're spiraling again. Have you been taking your medication?" She wasn't on medication. She had never been on medication. But he said it so often, so casually, that she began to wonder if she should be. He moved her keys. He hid her phone. He changed appointments in her calendar and then expressed gentle concern when she missed them. He called her mother and said, his voice thick with worry, "I'm really concerned about Clara. She's been so forgetful, so paranoid. She accused me of having an affair last week. I don't know what to do." Her mother, who had always liked Simon, called Clara the next day and asked, with careful tenderness, if she had considered talking to a therapist. Clara sat on the edge of her bed, the phone still warm in her hand, and felt the world tilt. Her own mother believed him. Her own mother thought she was losing her mind. She looked around the bedroom, the room she had shared with Simon for 6 years, the wedding photo on the dresser, the book she had been reading, still open on the nightstand, the faint, lingering scent of jasmine, and something else. A flicker of clarity buried deep beneath the layers of doubt and confusion. A small, stubborn voice that whispered, "You are not crazy. You are being erased." She didn't know what to do with that voice yet, but she heard it, and she did not let it go. The cameras were a desperate act, born of that small, stubborn voice. Clara had no proof. Simon was too careful, too skilled at shaping perception. Every time she tried to confront him, he turned the conversation back on her, her forgetfulness, her anxiety, her paranoia. Every time she tried to tell someone else, they looked at her with gentle, pitying eyes and asked if she had considered seeing a professional. She was trapped in a story he had written, and she had no way to rewrite it. So she decided to gather evidence. She bought the cameras online using a separate account and a prepaid credit card. They were small, discreet, designed to look like ordinary household objects. A phone charger, a smoke detector, a digital clock. She placed them in the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, and the bedroom. She didn't tell Simon. She didn't tell anyone. She simply turned them on and waited. For weeks, the footage showed nothing unusual. Simon coming home late, but alone. Simon on his phone in the living room, his voice too low to catch. Simon kissing her forehead before he left for work. His eyes warm and kind, the eyes of a man who loved his wife. Clara watched the footage and felt a familiar doubt creeping back. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe she really was paranoid. Maybe Simon was right. And then, on a Thursday night in early December, the cameras captured something else. Clara had gone to bed early, pleading a headache. She had taken the sleeping pill Simon offered, a small white tablet he said would help her rest, and drifted into a heavy, dreamless sleep. She woke hours later, her mouth dry, her head thick, and reached for the glass of water on her nightstand. The bed beside her was empty. She sat up slowly, her heart beginning to pound. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful quiet of a home at rest. A different quiet, a watchful quiet. She slipped out of bed and walked to the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see a sliver of the hallway. A light was on downstairs, and she could hear voices. She didn't go down, not that night. She was too disoriented, too heavy with the remnants of the sleeping pill. But in the morning, when Simon had left for work and the house was empty, she sat at her laptop and pulled up the footage from the living room camera. The video showed Simon in their living room at 11:47 p.m. He was not alone. A woman was with him. She was young, blonde, wearing a sleek black dress and heels that clicked against the hardwood floor. She was laughing at something Simon said, her head thrown back, her hand resting on his arm. Simon leaned in and kissed her. Not a quick, furtive kiss, but a long, slow, intimate kiss. The kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity and comfort and shared secrets. They sat on the sofa Clara had picked out, the one where she read her books and drank her tea and talked in low voices. Clara couldn't hear every word, but she heard enough. Her name spoken with a sigh. Clara's been difficult lately, the woman's voice, light and dismissive. You deserve better. Someone who actually appreciates you. Simon's laugh, low and warm. Soon. Just be patient. She's almost completely isolated. Another few months and she'll be so convinced she's crazy that she'll agree to anything. Clara stared at the screen. The video played on. Simon and the woman, in her house, on her sofa, planning her complete erasure. She felt something shift inside her. Not break, shift. Like a gear clicking into place. Like a lock finally turning after years of being jammed. She was not crazy. She had never been crazy. She had been gaslit, manipulated, systematically isolated, and undermined by the man who had promised to love her. And now she had proof. She didn't confront him. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't tell a single soul. She simply saved the footage to a secure cloud account, made multiple backups, and continued to watch. Night after night, the cameras captured more. Simon bringing the woman, her name was Vanessa, Clara learned, into their home while Clara slept, drugged by the sleeping pills he insisted she take. Simon and Vanessa laughing together, drinking Clara's wine, sitting on Clara's sofa, making plans for a future that didn't include her. And Clara watched and waited and built her case. Simon thought he was the architect of lies. He thought he had constructed a perfect prison, a story so compelling that even its victim believed it. He thought Clara was too broken, too isolated, too thoroughly erased to ever fight back. He was wrong. She was not broken. She was gathering evidence, and when she was ready, she would burn his entire carefully constructed world to the ground. But not yet. First, she would let him believe he had won. Clara was not crazy. She had known this for months now. Known it with the cold, crystalline clarity of a woman who had spent her career understanding how systems worked, how information flowed, how the truth could be hidden or revealed depending on who controlled the narrative. Simon thought he was the architect of lies because he had spent years in public relations, shaping stories for corporations and politicians. But Clara had spent her years in a different kind of work. She was a security consultant specializing in residential and commercial surveillance systems. She had designed security protocols for banks, for law firms, for high-net-worth individuals who needed to know that their secrets were safe. Simon knew she worked in security. He had never asked what that meant. He had never been interested in the details of her career, had dismissed it as a little tech job that kept her busy while he did the real work of building his image. He had no idea that his wife was one of the most sought-after surveillance specialists in the region. He had no idea that she could read a room not just for its emotional dynamics, but for its sightlines, its vulnerabilities, its hidden opportunities. He had no idea that she had been watching him for months. First camera went in 6 weeks after she found the lipstick stain. The one Simon had insisted wasn't there, holding the shirt up to the light with such genuine seeming confusion that she had almost believed him. Almost. But Clara had spent her career learning to trust evidence over emotion, data over narrative. She had stood in the bedroom, the shirt in her hands, and felt the old familiar instinct stir. Document, verify, prove. She started small. A single pinhole camera, disguised as a USB phone charger, plugged into the wall of the living room. It was a device she had recommended to dozens of clients. Discreet, high-definition, motion-activated, streaming directly to a secure cloud server that only she could access. She placed it while Simon was at work, positioning it to capture the sofa, the front door, and the hallway that led to the stairs. Just a test, she told herself, just to see. The footage from that first week showed nothing unusual. Simon coming home late, alone. Simon on his phone, his voice too low to catch. Simon moving through the house with the easy confidence of a man who believed he was the sole author of his own story. Clara watched the footage each night after he had fallen asleep and felt a familiar doubt creeping back. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the lipstick had been nothing. Maybe Simon was right, and she was spiraling, and she needed help. And then, on the 8th night, the camera captured Simon moving her keys. She watched it happen in real time, though she was watching the footage the next morning, alone in her home office with the door locked. Simon at 6:47 a.m. while Clara was in the shower. He walked into the kitchen, opened her purse, the one she always left on the counter, and removed her keys. He stood for a moment, looking around the kitchen with a small, private smile. Then he walked to the refrigerator, opened the door, and tucked the keys behind the milk carton. He closed the refrigerator, smoothed his tie in the reflection of the stainless steel, and walked out of the frame. Clara stared at the screen, her keys in the refrigerator, the same place he had found them weeks ago, after she had searched for an hour, tearing apart the house while he watched with gentle concern. He had put them there. He had hidden them, and then he had watched her unravel, and then he had rescued her, holding her while she cried with relief and confusion, telling her it was okay, that he would take care of her, that she just needed to rest. She replayed the footage, watched him hide her keys with the casual ease of a man who had done it before and would do it again, watched him smile. She didn't confront him, she didn't cry. She simply opened a new folder on her secure server and labeled it Evidence. Then she ordered more cameras. The second camera went into the kitchen, disguised as a smart fridge sensor, a small, unremarkable device that monitored temperature and humidity and, incidentally, captured high-definition video of the entire room. The third camera went into the hallway, tucked inside a smoke detector that Clara replaced herself while Simon was at a client dinner. The fourth went into the bedroom, hidden in a digital clock on her nightstand, angled to capture the bed and the doorway. She worked methodically, patiently, the way she had been trained. Each camera was tested, its feed verified, its position adjusted to maximize coverage while minimizing visibility. She used devices she had recommended to clients for years, equipment so discreet that even a trained eye would struggle to spot it. Simon, who had never shown any interest in her work, walked past the cameras every day without a flicker of suspicion. The footage accumulated, hours and hours of it, streaming to her secure server, time-stamped and organized. Clara watched it in fragments, early mornings before Simon woke, late nights after he slept, stolen moments when she could lock herself in her office and review the evidence of her own gaslighting. She watched him hide her phone in the pocket of a coat she hadn't worn in months, then express tender concern when she couldn't find it. She watched him change appointments in her calendar, deleting entries and replacing them with nothing, then sigh sadly when she missed events she had no memory of scheduling. She watched him call her mother, his voice thick with manufactured worry. "I'm really concerned about Clara. She's been so forgetful, so paranoid. I don't know what to do." And she watched him laugh, not in front of her, never in front of her, but in the kitchen, after he had hidden her keys, in the living room, after he had gaslit her into tears, in the bedroom, after she had taken the sleeping pill he offered, the one she now knew was a mild sedative, not the harmless supplement he claimed, and drifted into unconsciousness. He would stand in the kitchen or the living room, his phone in his hand, and he would laugh, a soft, private laugh, the laugh of a man who was enjoying himself. Clara watched these moments with a cold, steady calm. She was not hurt anymore. She was not confused. She was a professional, gathering evidence, building a case. Every laugh, every hidden key, every staged rescue was documented, time-stamped, and stored in multiple secure locations. Simon thought he was erasing her. He was actually writing his own confession. The affair footage came later. Clara had suspected, of course. The perfume on his collars, the late nights, the way he guarded his phone, angling the screen away from her when he thought she might see. But suspicion was not proof, and Clara dealt in proof. So she waited and watched. The woman's name was Vanessa. She was young, mid-20s, Clara guessed, with blonde hair and a sleek, polished look that spoke of money and ambition. She worked at Simon's firm, a junior associate who had been assigned to his team 6 months ago. Clara found this out through quiet, careful research, not through anything Simon told her. Simon had stopped telling her anything real months ago. The first time Vanessa appeared on the footage, it was a Tuesday night. Clara had taken her sleeping pill and gone to bed. feigning the heavy, drugged sleep that Simon expected. But she had palmed the pill, tucking it under her tongue and spitting it out once she was alone. She lay in the dark, her eyes open, listening to the sounds of the house. At 10:23 p.m., she heard the front door open and close. Soft footsteps, a woman's laugh. She didn't move. She didn't confront them. She simply lay in the dark, her heart a cold, steady drum, and let the cameras do their work. The footage showed everything. Simon and Vanessa in the living room, drinking Clara's wine, sitting on Clara's sofa. Simon and Vanessa kissing, not furtively, but openly, hungrily, the way people kissed when they believed they were alone. Simon and Vanessa talking in low voices, their words captured clearly by the microphone in the smoke detector. "How much longer?" Vanessa asked, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I'm tired of sneaking around. I'm tired of being a secret." "Soon." Simon's voice was warm, reassuring. "She's almost completely isolated. Her mother thinks she's losing her mind. Her friends have stopped calling. Another few weeks, and she'll be so convinced she's crazy that she'll agree to anything. A quiet divorce, a generous settlement to keep her comfortable. She'll be out of our lives, and no one will ever question it." Vanessa laughed, a light, musical sound. "You're terrible. You know that, right?" "I'm thorough." Simon kissed her again. "There's a difference." Clara watched the footage the next morning, alone in her office, a cup of cold coffee beside her. She watched it twice. Then she saved it to the secure server, added it to the growing file labeled Evidence, and continued with her day. She made Simon's breakfast. She kissed him goodbye when he left for work. She smiled when he asked, with tender concern, if she was feeling all right. She told him she was fine, just tired, nothing to worry about, and she waited. The compilation took weeks to assemble. Clara worked on it in fragments. Early mornings, late nights, stolen hours when Simon was at work or with Vanessa or otherwise occupied. She was meticulous. Every clip was trimmed to its essential content, labeled with date and time, and arranged in a narrative sequence that told the story of her systematic destruction. The hidden keys, the moved phone, the changed calendar appointments, the phone calls to her mother, his voice dripping with false concern, the staged rescues where he comforted her through crises he had manufactured, and then Vanessa, the kisses, the conversations, the plans for Clara's quiet, medically managed erasure. She didn't edit the footage to make Simon look worse. She didn't need to. The raw truth was damning enough. She simply organized it, creating a clear, chronological record of months of gaslighting, manipulation, and betrayal. When she was finished, the compilation ran just over 90 minutes, a feature-length documentary of her own abuse. She stored it on a secure cloud server protected by encryption that even she would struggle to break without the keys. She made physical backups on encrypted drives, which she stored in a safe deposit box at a bank Simon didn't know she used. She gave a third copy to her attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Hart, who specialized in high-conflict divorce and had seen, she said quietly, far too many cases like this. "What do you want to do with this?" Rebecca asked after reviewing the footage. Her face was pale, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We can go to the police. This is abuse. This is—" "Not yet." Clara's voice was calm. "I'm not ready. I need more." Rebecca looked at her for a long moment. More of what? Clara thought about the footage she had already gathered, the hours of evidence, the months of documentation. She thought about Simon's laugh, soft and private, as he hid her keys in the refrigerator. She thought about Vanessa's voice, light and dismissive. "You deserve better." She thought about the sleeping pills, the ones she had stopped taking weeks ago, the ones Simon still believed were rendering her unconscious and compliant. "I need him to say it," Clara said finally. "On camera, to me. I need him to admit what he's been doing, not just to Vanessa, in whispers, to my face. I need to see him drop the mask completely, and I need to be recording when he does." Rebecca was silent for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You're playing a dangerous game, Clara. He's already proven he's willing to hurt you. If he finds out what you're doing, he won't." Clara's voice was steady. "He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'm barely functional. He's so confident in his own story that he can't imagine anyone seeing through it. That's his weakness, and I'm going to use it." She stood up, gathered her things, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. "I'm not the one who should be afraid, Rebecca. He is. He just doesn't know it yet." The cameras continued to record. Night after night, they captured Simon moving through the house, confident, comfortable, utterly unaware that every word he spoke, every action he took was being preserved in high-definition detail. They captured Vanessa's visits, her laughter, her casual dismissal of Clara as that poor, unstable woman. They captured Simon's reassurances. "Soon, just be patient. She's almost gone." And Clara watched and waited and built her case. Simon thought he was the architect of lies. He thought he had constructed a perfect prison, a story so compelling that even its victim believed it. He thought Clara was too broken, too isolated, too thoroughly erased to ever fight back. He was wrong. She was not broken. She was gathering evidence, and when she was ready, when she had everything she needed, she would burn his entire carefully constructed world to the ground. But not yet. First, she would let him believe he had won. She would let him perform his concern, his tenderness, his lies. She would smile and nod and take her sleeping pills, the ones she palmed and flushed down the toilet, and she would wait. And when the moment came, she would be ready. The invitation arrived on a Thursday, printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock that Simon had clearly chosen himself. "A family meeting to discuss Clara's health and well-being," it read, in elegant, understated type. "Saturday, 2 p.m., at the home of Simon and Clara Vance. Your presence and support are deeply appreciated." Clara found the stack of invitations in Simon's briefcase while he was in the shower. She had been looking for a pen, just a pen, nothing more. And there they were, nestled between his leather-bound planner and a folder labeled Clara, Medical. She opened the folder. Inside were printouts about a private residential facility 3 hours north, a place called Evergreen Haven that specialized in women's wellness and behavioral health. The brochures featured photographs of serene gardens and smiling staff and women walking arm in arm through sunlit hallways. The language was soft, euphemistic, a safe, nurturing environment for women experiencing emotional and psychological challenges. Translation: a place where inconvenient wives could be quietly tucked away, medicated into compliance, and stripped of their autonomy while their husbands controlled their assets and their futures. Clara closed the folder and returned it exactly as she had found it. She didn't confront Simon. She didn't cry. She simply walked to her office, locked the door, and pulled up the footage from the cameras she had installed months ago. She had watched Simon plan this intervention for weeks. His phone calls to her mother, his carefully worded emails to her friends, his rehearsals in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing his somber, devoted husband face. She had watched him perfect the tremor in his voice, the catch in his breath, the single glistening tear he could produce on command. He was good. She would give him that. He was very, very good. But Clara was better. The living room was full when Clara walked in. Simon had arranged the seating carefully, her parents on the sofa, their faces drawn with worry, his parents in the armchairs, their expressions a mixture of concern and faint, unspoken judgment. 3 of their closest friends perched on chairs brought in from the dining room. The coffee table had been cleared of its usual books and candles. In their place was a single tissue box, positioned for maximum dramatic effect. Simon stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped before him, his head slightly bowed. He was wearing a soft gray sweater, the one Clara had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, the one he knew made him look vulnerable and kind. His face was arranged in an expression of tender, wounded devotion. When Clara entered, he looked up and smiled, a brave, trembling smile, the smile of a man facing an impossible burden with grace. "Clara, sweetheart, thank you for coming." He crossed the room and took her hands, his touch warm and familiar. "I know this is hard. I know you're scared, but everyone in this room loves you. We're all here because we want to help." Clara looked at him, at the man who had spent months hiding her keys, moving her phone, gaslighting her into believing she was losing her mind, at the man who had brought his mistress into their home while she slept, drugged by the pills he insisted she take, at the man who was now standing before their families and friends, preparing to have her committed to a facility where she would be stripped of her freedom and her future. She smiled. It was a small, calm smile, the smile of a woman who knew something no one else in the room knew. "Of course," she said softly. "I'm ready to listen." Simon's eyes flickered just for a moment, just enough for Clara to see the triumph beneath the tenderness. He believed she was broken. He believed she would fold, as she had folded so many times before, because he had spent months convincing her that she couldn't trust her own mind. He led her to a chair near the window, positioned so that everyone could see her, could observe her reactions, could witness her instability. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. Simon returned to his place by the fireplace. He took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and began. "I want to start by saying how much I love my wife." His voice was soft, measured, the voice of a man carefully controlling his emotions. "Clara is the most extraordinary person I've ever known. She's brilliant. She's kind. She's the woman I chose to spend my life with. And that's why this is so hard. That's why I've asked all of you here today." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Clara's mother was already dabbing at her eyes. Simon's mother was nodding slowly, her lips pressed together in a thin, sympathetic line. "Over the past year," Simon continued, "I've watched Clara struggle. She's been forgetful, anxious, paranoid. She's accused me of things, terrible things, that I would never do. She's convinced herself that I'm having an affair, that I'm trying to hurt her, that I'm somehow her enemy rather than her husband. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to be understanding. I've tried to get her help, but it's getting worse, and I'm scared." He produced the tear right on cue, a single glistening drop that slid down his cheek. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, his breath catching. "I just want my wife back," he whispered. "But her delusions about me being unfaithful have reached a dangerous peak. She's not sleeping. She's not eating. She spends hours locked in her office doing God knows what. I'm afraid she's going to hurt herself or someone else. I'm afraid I'm losing her, and I don't know how to save her." The room was silent. Clara's mother was openly crying now. Her father was staring at the floor, his jaw tight. Their friends looked stricken, their eyes darting between Simon and Clara with expressions of horrified sympathy. Simon reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded brochure. Evergreen Haven, the serene gardens, the smiling staff, the euphemistic promises of safety and healing. "I've done some research," he said, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "There's a facility upstate, a good one, private, compassionate. They specialize in cases like Clara's. I think she needs to go there, just for a little while, just until she's stable, until she's herself again. I can't keep watching her destroy herself. I love her too much." He looked at Clara, his eyes glistening with that single, perfect tear. "Sweetheart, I know this is hard to hear, but I'm doing this because I love you, because I want you to get better. Please, let us help you." The room turned toward Clara, expectant, pitying, waiting for her to break down, to protest, to prove Simon's point by spiraling into the paranoia he had so carefully described. Clara didn't move. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. She looked at Simon, at the man who had just tried, in front of everyone she loved, to have her committed to a facility where she would be stripped of her autonomy and her future. She looked at the brochure in his hand. She looked at the tear, still glistening on his cheek, and then she smiled. "Simon," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, the voice of a woman who had already won. "That was a beautiful performance, truly. You've always had a gift for narrative." Simon's expression flickered, confusion, a shadow of unease. "Clara, sweetheart, this isn't a performance. This is me, trying to help you. I know it's hard to hear, but it's hard to hear because it's a lie." Clara's voice didn't rise. "Every word you just said is a lie, and I can prove it." She reached into her bag, a simple leather tote she had carried for years, and withdrew a slim laptop. She set it on the coffee table beside the tissue box and opened it. The screen glowed to life, showing a single folder labeled labeled evidence. The room was silent. Simon's face had gone pale. "Clara," he said carefully, "I don't think this is the time for—" "Video 1, Clara said, ignoring him. "October 12th, 6:47 a.m. The kitchen." She clicked play. The footage filled the screen, crisp, high definition, unmistakably their kitchen. Simon, in his work clothes, walking to the counter, opening Clara's purse, removing her keys, walking to the refrigerator, tucking the keys behind the milk carton, closing the refrigerator, smoothing his tie, walking away, a soft, private smile on his face. Clara's mother gasped. Her father straightened, his eyes narrowing. Their friends exchanged looks of dawning horror. Video 2, Clara said, October 28th, 3:15 p.m. The living room. Simon on the phone. His voice captured clearly by the microphone in the smoke detector. "I'm really concerned about Clara. She's been so forgetful, so paranoid. She accused me of having an affair last week. I don't know what to do." A pause, a soft laugh. "No, she's not on medication, but I've been telling people she is. It makes the story more believable." Clara's mother made a small, wounded sound. Simon's mother had gone very still, her face a mask of shock. Video 3, Clara said, November 15th, 11:47 p.m. This room. The footage showed Simon and Vanessa. The kisses, the conversation. "She's almost completely isolated. Another few weeks, and she'll be so convinced she's crazy that she'll agree to anything." Vanessa's laugh, Simon's warm, reassuring voice. "Soon, just be patient." The room was no longer silent. Clara's father had risen to his feet, his face dark with fury. Simon's mother was staring at her son as if she had never seen him before. Their friends were frozen, their expressions cycling between shock and disgust. Simon's face had gone gray. The tear, the single perfect tear, had dried on his cheek. The brochure for Evergreen Haven hung limp in his hand. "Clara," he whispered, "I can explain. There's nothing to explain." Clara's voice was calm, steady. "I have months of footage, Simon. Every hidden key, every moved phone, every staged rescue, every kiss, every conversation, every moment you spent erasing me while pretending to save me. It's all here, and it's all been shared with my attorney, who is preparing to file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and marital fraud." She stood up, closing the laptop and tucking it back into her bag. She looked around the room, at her mother, whose tears had turned from grief to fury, at her father, who looked ready to physically remove Simon from the house, at their friends, who were staring at Simon as if he were a stranger. "You wanted to have me committed," Clara said quietly. "You wanted to strip me of my freedom, my autonomy, my future. You thought you could erase me piece by piece until there was nothing left but the story you had written. But you forgot something, Simon." She met his eyes. His face was a mask of devastation. Not guilt, she knew, but the terror of a man who had just watched his carefully constructed world collapse. "I'm not the one who's crazy," Clara said. "I'm the one who's been watching, and I have everything I need to make sure you never hurt anyone again." She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at her parents, her friends, the people who had been manipulated into believing she was broken. "I'm going to stay with my mother for a few days," she said. "When I come back, I expect this house to be empty. I expect Simon to be gone, and I expect never to see him again except in a courtroom." She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. Behind her, the room erupted, voices rising, accusations flying, the sound of a man's carefully constructed world collapsing into rubble. Clara didn't look back. She walked to her car, got in, and drove away. She was free. She had always been free. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to prove it. The room was still in chaos when Clara walked back in. She had not gone far, just to the front porch, where she had stood for a long moment, breathing the cool evening air and letting the noise of the collapsing intervention wash over her. She could hear her father's voice, raised in fury, her mother's sobs, now sharp with betrayal rather than grief, Simon's voice, high and desperate, trying to regain control of a narrative that had already slipped irrevocably from his grasp. She waited until the noise peaked, until she could feel through the walls that the room was at its most volatile, its most receptive to what she was about to do. Then she opened the door and walked back inside. The living room fell silent. Every face turned toward her. Her parents, Simon's parents, their friends, all of them frozen in the aftermath of the footage she had already shown. Simon was standing near the fireplace, his face pale and slick with sweat, his carefully constructed mask of devoted husband now shattered beyond repair. He looked at her with something she had never seen in his eyes before, genuine fear. "Clara," his voice was hoarse, "please, we can talk about this privately. You don't need to." "You're right, Simon." Clara's voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who had already won. "I am obsessed with the truth. I've been obsessed with it for months, and since you've gone to so much trouble to gather everyone here, I think they deserve to see the full picture, don't you?" She walked to the media console and picked up the TV remote, not the small one that controlled the sound system, but the large, universal remote that managed the entire home entertainment system. Simon had always been proud of that system. He had spent thousands on the massive 4K screen, the surround sound, the sleek, minimalist setup that dominated the living room. He had used it to host Super Bowl parties and movie nights, to impress clients and friends, to project an image of success and control. He had never imagined it would be used against him. Clara pressed a single button. The screen glowed to life. At first there was nothing, just a black screen, the soft hum of the electronics. Then text appeared, white letters on a black background, simple and stark. "Highlight reel, the truth about Simon Vance." Simon's face went gray. "Clara, don't, please. I'm begging you." Clara didn't look at him. She pressed play. The bedroom, November 15th, 11:47 p.m. The footage filled the screen, crisp, high definition, unmistakably the master bedroom of their home. The camera was positioned in the digital clock on Clara's nightstand, angled to capture the bed and the doorway. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Simon and Vanessa together in Clara's bed. The room gasped. Clara's mother made a strangled sound. Simon's mother turned away, her hand pressed to her mouth. Their friends stared at the screen, their expressions cycling between shock and revulsion. On screen, Simon and Vanessa were laughing, tangled in the sheets Clara had washed and changed every week. Vanessa's voice, light and dismissive. "Does she really not know? How can she not know?" Simon's voice, warm with condescension. "She's so deep in her own head now, she doesn't know anything. I could bring you here every night, and she'd never figure it out. She thinks she's losing her mind. It's almost sad." Vanessa laughed. "Almost." Clara let the clip play for 30 seconds, long enough for the room to absorb the full reality of what they were seeing. Then she pressed a button, and the screen shifted. The kitchen, October 3rd, 10:12 p.m. The kitchen camera, disguised as a smart fridge sensor. Simon, alone, moving through the room with the easy confidence of a man who believed he was unwatched. He opened the cabinet where Clara kept her wine, a small collection of bottles she had accumulated over years, gifts from clients and friends, special occasions waiting to be opened. He took down a bottle of Chateau Margaux, a gift from her father on her 30th birthday. She had been saving it. She had told Simon she wanted to open it on their next anniversary. He uncorked it. He poured it down the sink, the entire bottle. Then he rinsed the sink, placed the empty bottle back in the cabinet, and walked away. A soft, private smile on his face. The room was silent. Clara's father had risen to his feet, his hands clenched into fists. "That was the wine I gave her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That was her birthday wine. You poured it down the sink." On screen, another clip began. Simon, a week later, standing in the same kitchen, shaking his head sadly as Clara searched for the bottle. "Sweetheart, I think you might have drunk it. You've been so forgetful lately. It's okay. We'll get you help." Clara's mother was crying, not the soft, sympathetic tears of before, but hot, furious tears. He made her think she was an alcoholic. He made her think she was drinking and forgetting while he poured her wine down the sink. The living room, December 2nd, 3:30 p.m. Simon on the phone. His voice captured clearly. "No, she's not on medication. But I've been telling everyone she is. It's easier that way. People believe what you tell them, especially when it's about a woman's mental health. They want to believe it. Confirms something they already suspect, that women are unstable, emotional, unreliable. I'm just giving them what they expect. A pause, a soft laugh. Of course I feel guilty, but not enough to stop. She's worth it. Vanessa, I mean. Clara was just a phase, a mistake. I'm correcting it now. The room was no longer silent. Simon's mother had begun to cry, ugly, wrenching sobs that shook her entire frame. Their friends were looking at Simon as if they had never seen him before, as if a mask had been ripped away to reveal something monstrous beneath. And Simon himself stood frozen by the fireplace, his face a ruin of terror and disbelief. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "How did you—" "I told you." Clara's voice was calm. "I'm a security consultant. I design systems for a living. You thought I was just playing with computers. You never asked what I actually did. You never cared enough to ask." She pressed another button, and the screen went dark. "That's not all," she said. "There's hours more. Every hidden key, every moved phone, every staged rescue, every kiss, every conversation, every moment you spent erasing me while pretending to save me. It's all documented. It's all timestamped. And it's all been shared with my attorney, who is preparing to file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and marital fraud." She reached into her bag and withdrew a slim folder. She walked to the coffee table, the same table where Simon had placed the tissue box and the Evergreen Haven brochure, and set it down. "This is the divorce petition," she said. "It's already been signed by a judge. I've also secured a temporary restraining order, which means you cannot come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. The locks on this house have been changed. Your personal effects will be delivered to your mother's address by the end of the week." Simon stared at the folder. His hands were shaking. "Clara, please, we can work this out. I love you. I've always loved you. Vanessa was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I'll end it. I'll get help. You'll do nothing." Clara's voice was quiet, final. "You'll sign the papers. You'll leave this house tonight. You'll never contact me again, except through our attorneys. And if you try to fight this, if you try to spin another story, to paint me as unstable, to salvage your reputation, I will release every single piece of footage to the press. Every kiss, every lie, every moment of your carefully constructed performance. There will be nothing left of you, Simon. Nothing but the truth." The room was utterly still. Clara looked around at the faces of the people who had been brought here to witness her commitment. Her mother, her father, Simon's parents, their friends. They were no longer looking at her with pity or concern. They were looking at Simon with horror, with disgust, with the slow, dawning realization that they had been complicit in his lies. They had believed him. They had doubted her. They had been ready to send her away to a facility where she would have been stripped of her freedom and her future. And now they knew the truth. "The only person who needs a facility, Simon," Clara said quietly, "is someone who thinks they're smart enough to lie to a woman who builds security systems for a living. You spent months trying to convince everyone I was crazy. You hid my keys, you moved my phone, you poured my wine down the sink and told me I was drinking too much. You brought your mistress into our home, into our bed, while I slept. And you did it all with a smile, believing you were the smartest person in every room." She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at him, at the man she had loved, the man who had tried to destroy her, the man who was now standing in the ruins of his own lies, his face a mask of devastation. "You were wrong," she said. "You weren't the smartest person in the room. You were just the loudest, and now you're nothing." She turned to her parents, who were standing together near the sofa, their faces wet with tears. But not the tears of grief Simon had manufactured. These were tears of fury, of shame, of the terrible knowledge that they had almost helped destroy their own daughter. "Mom, Dad, I'll call you tomorrow. I need some time tonight, just for me." Her mother nodded, her voice breaking. "Take all the time you need, sweetheart. We're so sorry. I know." Clara's voice softened. I know you are, and we'll talk about it, but not tonight. Tonight, I need to be alone. She walked out of the house, her house now, fully and finally hers, and into the cool evening air. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. She stood on the porch for a long moment, breathing. The sky was deepening into twilight, the first stars beginning to emerge. The street was quiet, the houses glowing with warm light, the ordinary world continuing on, indifferent to the small drama that had just concluded. She was free. She had always been free. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to prove it. She walked to her car, the modest sedan Simon had always dismissed as unimpressive, and drove away. Behind her, in the house that was no longer his, Simon Vance stood alone in the ruins of his carefully constructed world, surrounded by the people who had finally seen him for what he was. The crazy label he had tried to pin on Clara had found its true home. And Clara, the woman who had been systematically erased, had written herself back into existence with footage, patience, and the quiet, devastating power of the truth.